We have, as a caucus, laid out an aggressive agenda. You're going to see a lot of common ground between where the Senate is and the House is and the governor. But we're going to work on regulatory reform, on labor reform, on tort reform. Education reform is going to be part of our agenda, and also the core values that I talked about today. In addition to that, as I said when I was in this room on the last day of session in May, our priority to do substantive, meaningful ethics reform has not gone away. And so we're going to start the session off as we did last year with Representative Alferman's bill banning lobbyist gifts. I know the men and women behind me are excited for the start of the session. We're excited to have the new faces and the new talent and new experience in this caucus. And I think it's going to be an incredibly productive legislative session for our priorities and for the priorities of people of the state. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Secretary Kander,
I'm shocked that this is the first question out of the box.
Secretary Kander brought up some concerns that some members of your caucus might try to add in additional provisions to the state's voter ID law. Is that going anywhere under your leadership?
I think we worked very hard to get that law passed last year, and we're going to be happy to work with Secretary Ashcroft to make sure that that law gets implemented fairly. I think the characterization that Secretary Kander had of this disenfranchising voters is part of the same line of misrepresentation of what voter ID is about that we've heard my entire time in the General Assembly. So we're going to continue to try to pass legislation that ensures fair elections, but we're not going to do so in a way that disenfranchises voters.
Can you tell us what happened to House Resolution 5?
House Resolution 5, you could ask the majority floor leader who's standing next to me. He'd probably prefer that I answer that question for him. But we did not take up House Resolution 5 today.
Was there a reason why you did not take up House Resolution 5?
Look, I have a great deal of respect for Secretary Kander. I served with him here in the Missouri House. But I think there is a time and a place for that kind of discussion. And I think the Secretary's bringing that issue, particularly in the way he did during the session today, was probably beyond the responsibility of the Secretary of State.
On top of your agenda, I know Scott Trade is going to be coming to the state to try to get some kind of financial help to renovate the place. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I love going to Scott Trade. I haven't visited with them yet, so I'm not going to pass judgment on. I don't know what their ask is going to be, if they're going to have an ask, but we'll look at it when they get here.
Given what the governor said about a soccer stadium, does that?
Look, I don't have any different position the governor has. Generally, I don't think public funding of stadiums is a good idea. So that's going to be the general approach we take when we look at those issues.
What are you hearing from the Senate on a lobbyist gift ban?
You'd have to ask the Senate. Their intent, I've talked to leadership over there. They have assured me that they want to work with us to move that bill forward, and I'm optimistic that it'll get through the Senate.
This red flag was going to go to committee tomorrow, first day that you're allowed to do so.
Yep.
Where are we going to see where Uber and some of those things like Airbnb, when are those bills going to come?
Those bills, a great deal of them will be referred tomorrow. I'm going to refer somewhere in excess of 50 bills before the end of the day tomorrow, and then we'll be steadily referring stuff throughout next week.
When would you like to see right to work get sent to the floor?
Well, I'd like to see it as soon as possible. And I mean, obviously it's going to be an issue. It's going to take some public testimony and a little bit of time, but I anticipate it's something we'll have very early in session.
Like in January?
Like in January.
Representative McCain-Beatty said that little or nothing's been done in response to Ferguson. Do you think more needs to be done to address that? And
Well,
some of those underlying issues as she phrased it?
I disagree with the characterization that little or nothing has been done. But I do agree that more needs to be done. And what our caucus has been firmly committed to trying to help in areas where there is a distrust of government, where people have lost faith and belief that anybody's looking out for them, where there's no educational opportunities, where there's no economic opportunities. And those were the things I talked about very broadly today. We have areas of our state, whether you're talking about in rural southeast Missouri or you're talking about in Ferguson, where you don't have the kind of education system and the economic opportunities that we should have in this state. This caucus and this majority is going to be fiercely committed to trying to create those kinds of opportunities all over the state. Anything else?
What, have you met with the governor much? How much have you met with the governor?
I've met with the governor numerous times. He was gracious enough to join us at our caucus meeting today, and so we're very excited about the new partnership there and the ability to work together.
What does it mean to you that the governor-elect came to speak to your caucus this morning?
Well, I was proud to invite him, and it meant a lot, I know, to our members to have him do that in the midst of a lot of other stuff that they've got going on. And I think it shows that we're going to have a very strong working relationship moving forward.
He's proposing a one-to-one revolving door ban. Do you support revolving door ban of that length?
Look, we passed a revolving door ban last year that wasn't as long as we wanted it in the House, because that's the version that came out of the Senate. We're happy to discuss with our colleagues in the Senate and the governor strengthening that ban. Where that ultimately needs to land or will land is something that's just a little too early to answer.
I've been hearing a lot from the House, and especially from you, about education reform. What are some of the specific things that you want to see this caucus present in the vein of education?
I talked about three things today. The first is to continue our efforts to expand access to high-performing charter schools, particularly in the areas where we have failing school districts. The second is to expand course access through virtual education. And the third is to continue an effort we started last year on education savings account, particularly for those students most in need. So I think that's where we'll start. But we're also going to be committed to supporting public education where it's getting the job done, and continue to make those investments in teachers that have that big responsibility of educating our children.
Mr. Speaker, I do have a question. Gail Beatty put out a statement, and she's going to speak here in a moment. She will insist that right to work go to a vote of the people. I don't see the referendum in the Holly Rader bill. Maybe I'm missing it, but would you be willing to put it to a public vote, or is this going to be a straight legislative decision, House and Senate?
I think it will be a straight legislative decision.
And why is that?
That's the way we want to proceed with it. You know, it's funny that when we talked about putting this to a vote of the people back when we had a different occupant in the governor's office, I don't think that people on the other side of the aisle were too excited about that. But look, this has been an issue that's been litigated in the public's, in the election cycle. This was a big issue during the campaign. The voters had the opportunity to weigh in on it, and we're going to be ready to pass it and put it into law.
What about tax credit reform?
Tax credit reform is going to continue to be an issue that we're going to look at. I support some tax credit reform. We're going to have to, figure out how we can partner with our colleagues in the Senate and with the governor to get that done. But it's going to be something we're certainly going to take a look at.
You spoke about regulatory reform. Are there any specific regulations that you think right off the board should be nixed?
Well, I think that we need to have a statewide regulatory framework for Uber and Lyft, and particularly for our home sharing companies, because I think it's important that we embrace as a state these disruptive technologies. But beyond those very specific examples, I want our Committee on Government Efficiency and our Committee on Professional Registration and Licensure to look at the places where Missouri is out of step with the regulatory requirements necessary to protect the public safety. We've spent a lot of time talking about hair braiding. It's ridiculous to me that you've got to go through the kind of hundreds of hours requirement that you have to go through in this state just because you want to braid hair to make a little extra money. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at, and it's going to be a broad-based effort to get that regulatory burden to a place where people can start a business and can grow a business.
Can we expect to see a bill on making Missouri's driver's licenses real ID compliant?
It's an issue we've talked about a lot as a caucus. It's not an issue that's gone away, so I think you'll see continued discussion on that issue going forward. Thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing you throughout the session, and we're going to go cut a cake here in a minute.